Hello, it's Bactrian, and today we're going to be talking about not Canada, the United States. We're going to be talking about the 2028 Republican primaries. Just a little speculative list of who I think are the most likely GOP presidential candidates in 2028. Now, you might say it's a bit early to be talking about this. It's only 2025, but these things go on pretty long these days, right? I think there's a strong likelihood that you'll have the first 2028 serious contenders in both parties having declared their candidacies, potentially as early as just after the midterms in 2026. I think we could be just a year away from the start of the 2028 presidential cycle. So I don't actually think it's that ridiculous to talk about it at this early of a juncture. And I will caveat it with, of course, things may change, blah, 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 but I'm sure you understand that. So we're going to be going in order from who I think is the most likely, and we'll be starting off here with J.D. Vance, to who I think is the least likely, or sort of the collection of people. And we'll probably be spending less time on the most likelies towards the least likelies, just because, there are interesting things about Vance, but I don't think it's terribly interesting the reasons why he's the most likely 2028 presidential candidate. He's the sitting vice president. I think it's fairly self-evident. But let's get into it for a minute there. So Vance, he's the vice president. He seemingly has done nothing to sort of draw Trump's ire in any way, or sort of risk his not really being able to get the endorsement from Trump. I think it's strongly likely that he'll be able to get Trump's endorsement, assuming he continues to just kind of go on the path that he is. I will say that he does occasionally have moments that sort of, where he maybe steps in it a little. He's a little too happy to talk to the media and sort of express his own view on things at times, where he's not entirely aligned with Trump, in theory, and then he'll always kind of meet him. Examples of this are that he was a huge proponent of the, we got to release the Epstein stuff, all of that. Obviously, Trump is not in favor of that, really. And also has never really been that much openly, right? He always, whenever he talked about it, he would be like, well, there's a lot of people who, are innocent, who are wrapped up in that whole thing. It's just an example of something where I could see Vance somehow finding a way to kind of piss off Trump and not get his endorsement, not have Trump clear the field for him. And that is sort of that's sort of the thing that makes me not just say it's a total wrap for Vance. There are, a couple other things too, but, I'd say that overall he is a very strong, obviously the number one most likely person at this stage to be the 2028 Republican nominee. Moving on, let's go to Marco Rubio, who is the current Secretary of State. He's, I think, the second most likely GOP nominee in 2026, which is 2028, which is kind of an incredible turnaround, frankly, because he seemingly had been kind of, written off to an extent as sort of not really presidential timber in the GOP post his 2016 run, just kind of because he got, like everyone else, he got washed by Trump. But, he has over the years been able to kind of tiptoe his way back into the kind of the good graces of the Trumpy GOP, and nowadays is, of course, a kind of core integral member of Trump's inner circle. He's basically Trump's Kissinger, right? Like, he's currently the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, which, it says here his dual role was last held by Henry Kissinger from 1973 to 1975. He is an immensely powerful figure currently. And I'll also say, to bolster my kind of argument here, why he might be, more likely than you'd maybe think to be Trump's guy, is that Trump, I could find the source here, but whatever, we just have it right here. He was on Squawk Box on CNBC, and he was saying that he probably wouldn't run for a third term, although he'd like to. But then he also said that Vance and Rubio would be his two picks, and for another little recent thing, this is from a I just have some editor article about it, but this is from a Wall Street Journal piece. He apparently in private conversations very recently was like, which one of you is going to be at the top of the ticket? I used to think it would be Vance Rubio, but maybe it'll be Rubio Vance, stuff like this. Now, of course, it could be like Rubio's people leaking this, something like that. But I mean, it does seem like Trump has a kind of real liking for Rubio, right? I mean, he's given him an immense amount of power inside of his administration. His whatever squeamishness he has had about intervention in theory in the past to an extent, although that is sort of overstated. People like to forget that he did the strike on Soleimani and other stuff like that in the first term, has, seemingly gone away entirely. I mean, he's currently doing this whole kind of narco intervention, Noriega type intervention in around Venezuela. Who knows where that's going? He of course did the strikes on the Fordo site in Iran, and has backed Israel to the hilt. He's pursued a pretty hawkish foreign policy, not even counting, of course, the irredentism and sort of like, we're going to annex this and that, we're going to annex Greenland, we're going to annex Canada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, even if that's all more, kind of fantasia. In real terms, I mean, he has had a very, very hawkish foreign policy. So the whole Rubio's a neocon, like that sort of thing that maybe a lot of the party base might be into saying, or was into saying, I just don't think has any, it just doesn't land anymore. Now, depending on how things go for the next few years, that's the other thing, of course, about these things, is that if Trump gets, and this could totally happen, gets embroiled in some massive foreign policy catastrophe, like an extended intervention in I guess, Venezuela or Iran both seem totally possible at this stage. Maybe the GOP will be in a lot less of a kind of hawkish mood, and someone like Rubio might not really land, but that also could totally just not happen. And Rubio, he could be a pretty strong contender, especially if, Vance is unable to clear the field, or if Rubio somehow outmaneuvers him completely and is able to get Trump's endorsement, which seems unlikely, but, could happen. You never know. So I think that kind of, other things for Rubio, of course, is that he was also, he came in third place in the 2016 Republican primaries. He was sort of, at that time, he was running as the moderate candidate, the most credible one, until when he dropped out after losing Florida. Kasich sort of consolidated that whole lane in the context of a Republican primary, of course. So, he was not actually particularly moderate. Rubio's whole thing, he had the whole, a new American century, it says on the tiny little logo font there. He was basically running on a kind of third George W. Bush term, right? Of a very hawkish foreign policy paired with a sort of I guess a little maybe stuff like a pathway to citizenship, stuff like that, right? These days that would not be the whole thing at all, right? It would pretty much just be, he would pretty much just freeze most of Trump's current domestic policies, and then I think you would have a pretty hard focus on foreign policy or whatever. I guess I got a little more into the kind of policy priorities and whatever than I did for Vance, but, whatever. I don't think the possibility of a Rubio presidency is discussed as much, so maybe that's of interest. But he's my second place pick. So for third place, I'm going to be going with a combination of, kind of a weird one for it, Eric Trump / Donald Trump Jr. Now, why do I say both of them? It's just kind of one thing. It's basically the Trump son, the Trump dynastic pick slot, right? And so why do I say either Eric Trump or Don Jr.? And, previously I wouldn't have said Eric Trump at all because he had shown no interest in politics. It was just Don Jr. But these days, Eric Trump is showing a bit more interest in politics. This was just back in June. He was musing about. He was like, I think I could run for president. The real question is, do you want to drag other members of your family into it? Would I want my kids to live the same experience over the last decade that I live? If the answer was yes, I think the political path would be an easy one. Meaning, I think I could do it. And of course, like, for someone like this, like him or Don Jr., they're not going to be, fucking around in the Senate or the House. It's not happening. It's the same thing with like Laura Trump. Will she, won't she run for Senate somewhere? This is not going to happen. You're not going to have a dynastic, like, especially with the Trump clan. Like, these guys are not going to do that, right? They're going to go for something big and dumb. Like, yeah, I'm going to run for president, right? After being the president's son, and that's my only qualification, right? I mean, at least W. Bush was like governor of Texas or whatever the fuck, right? But yeah, I mean, obviously, if one of his kids wants to run for president, you could see Trump maybe being persuaded to endorse them and clear the field for them. And you know what I mean? For Eric Trump and Don Jr., it's definitely boom times for the Trump kids, like in that regard. Because in the first term, of course, there was famously the Javanka thing. It was sort of Ivanka and Jared Kushner who were the most influential Trump family members in that White House. But, they have moved on from politics to an extent, right? I mean, they want to go be New York socialites, right? So Eric Trump, I guess, to an extent, although I hadn't really known about that until he made these comments, and Don Jr., they're the much more, especially Don Jr., the much more political ones, much more politically involved, in terms of just having a podcast and whatever other, shit they do. But the point being that, now to be clear, they would not run unless Trump was clearing the field for them. It just wouldn't happen because, he would just say to them, like, you're not running, like it's not happening. But I could see a scenario where one of them is able to sort of get Trump to clear the field for them. And if they did, then I think they'd be very likely to win. And yes, I do think that 90% of this is contingent on who Trump endorses. I don't really think that's a particularly controversial take. Trump has overwhelming approval ratings in the Republican Party, like 95%. He is the GOP. It is Trump's party. It is Trump's movement. And so the idea that someone who is going to be running in contravention to him is going to win 28 presidential primaries, there's just no way. Like, maybe the whole thing completely falls apart somehow. Like, just the entire project just crumbles. Maybe. And, of course, the possibility of, like, some sort of health thing. Like, he dies or has a kind of Woodrow Wilson style stroke where he's completely immobile. That could happen. He at inauguration he's the oldest person at that time to take the oath of office. Obviously, Biden was older when he left office, but Biden was a few months younger than him when he took the oath of office than Trump was on January 20th, 2025, right? So he's very, very old. Obviously there was the recent health scare stuff. And yeah, but barring a scenario like that, it's going to be who he picks, overwhelmingly likely, and it's totally possible to see him picking his own kids. I mean, that makes sense intuitively. It happens a lot in politics, all the time. It's just sort of, it's one of those. It's human nature, whatever. Dynastic politics. It happens. So I would not be shocked if that happened, even if they are both sort of total political neophytes. It would present plenty of problems, obviously, and I think there would be a lot of people, there would be a lot of people who would not want him to do that. But I think it could happen. Sorry, there was a notification sound. I actually don't know if it picked that up a second ago, but whatever, it doesn't matter. It would be an interesting scenario, though, and I would say that those two are the third most likely, just them together as a block. So then number 4, I'm going to say the guy himself, Donald Trump. Now, of course, how would he do that? I mean, there are term limits. I'm going to say it is pretty unambiguous. You look at it as it is written, 22nd Amendment, he cannot run for a third term. However, the Supreme Court is overwhelmingly conservative, right? Overwhelmingly conservative. I think it's like oh my God, my computer fans are going crazy, but I think it's like something like a 7, it's not 7-2, it's 6-3. Is it 7-2? I don't know. Either way, it is a very conservative court. And so, all essentially, a couple things would have to line up. First of all, Trump's health has to hold up, obviously. He has to be in a position where he's sort of able to run, and he's able to get the buy-in of everyone around him, and that does matter, even if he singularly is an incredibly powerful figure politically. If everyone around him is sort of like, I don't really think this guy can do it, then it kind of is a bit hard to. And yeah, he's 79, right? He would be hilariously old by the time that he would run in 2028, or get the second term. Again, he'd be older than Biden would have been, and look how that ended, right? But what I'll say for this is that he, the other thing that would have to happen is that he has to be popular enough where he sort of thinks he can pull it off. I don't think there's really a question of whether he wants to keep being president. Like he said in that, that appearance on CNBC or whatever, he would like to be president continually. And I don't think that's controversial even with his supporters or whatever. Of course, yeah, he'd want to be president forever. I mean, are you kidding me? Come on. He clearly, he has structured the last decade of his life with the single-minded goal of being president and staying in power as the president. He really, really, really wants to be the president. I don't think that's particularly controversial. The thing is, though, is that he would have to have, like, if his approval ratings are in the kind of low 30s by like mid 2026, which seems totally plausible because his approval ratings right now are kind of like low 40s, right? Then it's hard. It's just hard to imagine. Not that he's like looking at the numbers and he's like, oh, I don't know, but it's just the feeling and political momentum and how these things work. Like in a scenario where his presidency is kind of stagnated, particularly if he loses the midterms badly, which could happen. I'm not sure. I mean, there's redistricting, all sorts of stuff going on with that. But if you have a scenario where the gears are kind of grinding to a halt, I find it hard to believe that he would be willing to take the risk of trying to break through the 22nd Amendment, right? But let's say that he does. What would that look like? Well, I think what he would do is he would just run. Right? I mean, he would what is the Republican Party not going to, of course, he would win that primary easily. He would face a little bit of blowback, I think, from some people, mainly because a lot of people would be pissed, because they want to run themselves. And they're like, well, come on, what is this guy going to be the candidate forever? I mean, like, I want to move on with my career. I want to be a cabinet secretary in the Marco Rubio administration, like whatever, right? So I think he would piss off a lot of people by doing that. But whatever. I mean, he could easily crush all of them within a GOP primary. I don't think it would be any question there. Then it gets a little more complicated, because I think what he could get away with, because of course he had the non-consecutive terms, I think he could get away with just through sheer political will, forcing the Supreme Court, which is an overwhelmingly conservative court, strong-arming them basically into just kind of saying like, 22nd Amendment, sure, but if you're non-consecutive, yeah, you can go for the third term. Why not? It's 2 consecutive terms. Just interpreting it that way. I think that would be the path where he could do it. And it would probably be like a 5-4 decision. You'd probably have one conservative justice be like, I don't know, like someone like Roberts or whatever. But they would rubber stamp it when push really comes to shove. Like, are they really gonna be like, no, that's it, end of your political career, Mr. Trump, I'm sorry, right? No, I think they would ultimately rubber stamp that. It might be contentious, but in this scenario where he's politically powerful enough to do this, if his approval ratings are absolutely in the toilet, and he decides to go for it, I think that there's a very strong chance the Supreme Court would just kick it away. But if he was more powerful and agile politically, then I think he could strong arm them into it. I think it's actually quite likely. Then what would happen is that I think you would have a scenario where the election would sort of largely lose legitimacy. What do I mean by that? I mean that you would I imagine a lot of Democratic states like California, New York, whatever, would kick him off the ballot. I think they would just immediately do that. Of course, in retaliation, most red states would immediately kick the Democratic candidate off the ballot. Probably all of them, and probably all Democratic states would, kick Trump off the ballot. I think it would very quickly devolve into sort of a scenario where the election is like, I find it hard to believe that many swing states would kick either candidate off the ballot, because of course, most of the states there, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's obvious who's going to win, right? It sort of just comes down to like a handful of states. And I don't know. I kind of find it hard to believe that any of those would kick either one off the ballot in that scenario. Maybe if one had like a really strong one-party control or whatever, just because it would be so controversial to actually swing the outcome. But either way, the whole thing would just turn into a clown show, and it would be very, very delegitimizing, regardless of if he was able to pull it off, which I'm not even saying is impossible. I think he could go for it and maybe win, maybe do it. I don't actually see why not in a number of ways. And maybe it wouldn't even be as controversial if he's like extremely popular for some reason. Like if he has some total turnaround, has a crisis that really benefits him, whatever. I mean, crazy things can happen. So I'm going to say, number 4 is him. I think he could totally do it. Do I think it's terribly likely? No, just because of the way these things go. He's pretty old. It hasn't gone amazingly so far. I think there's a strong likelihood that as he gets further and further into this, it just becomes clear, like, this isn't happening. It's just there's no way, as much as he might want it to be the case. And whatever. I mean, he already had the incredible comeback triumph, right? So I think that to an extent, as much as he would like to, there are further mountains to climb or whatever, as much as he would like to do that, I can also see him just kind of kicking up his feet and being like, okay, I did it. I came back. They were going to lock me up, but, here I am, right? I won again, and I'm kind of cemented as a world historic figure. So I would say that he's 4th place. He's 4th place, easily. And it would be a very interesting, wild, crazy scenario if he ran for a 3rd term. It would be quite something to behold. And we might live to see it. I mean, come on. Now, who do I have for number 5? I have everyone else. I'll be more specific with this. I have an open primary, right? Now, what do I mean by that? I would consider this a scenario where, for whatever reason, Trump doesn't endorse someone, right? I think that if Trump isn't backing someone, I think it's going to be a total crapshoot, because I don't actually think that Rubio or Vance... I mean, I guess I'll also include a scenario where someone with the Trump last name doesn't run for whatever reason, which could happen. But, basically you have a scenario where one of the top contenders, just for whatever reason, Trump doesn't endorse them, right? And instead you're left with a much more open field. In that scenario, it really is anyone's game. I think that the party is really kind of listless without Trump. Honestly, I think he is single-handedly holding up and keeping together a very wide coalition of forces, a little bit too wide of a coalition. And I think you would have a scenario where, you could see all sorts of people running, right? I mean, you got a bunch of names here. They don't have RFK Jr. because he's like, oh, I'm actually not running. Bullshit. I mean, he's very likely to run. Like, I think he recently, because Laura Loomer was like accusing him of angling to run. So he's like, no, I'm not. I don't want to run in 2028. He absolutely would run if this scenario presented itself. I have no doubt about it. But, other candidates, who do I think would have like a strong possibility inside of a scenario like this? I can tell you a couple who wouldn't. I think DeSantis would be dead in the water. I think his 2024 campaign showed him to be, A, the fact that he ran at all, but then B, just the way it played out, what he did. He is not presidential timber. I think he would perform terribly, even if he on paper might be a strong candidate for it. Also, I mean, he's not going to be governor in a year. I don't know what he's going to do for 2027, 2028 to stay in the headlines. I guess maybe run, but it doesn't seem very likely. You got some other people. I mean, maybe Tim Scott would run a run. He did not run a terribly impressive campaign. He spent most of it kind of like having this weird, speculation about whether or not he had a girlfriend or not. It was kind of embarrassing. It was not a particularly good showing. I mean, people like to talk about the governors like Kemp or Abbott. Abbott, I don't know why Abbott would run in 2028. I mean, he's not term limited, right? Like in Texas, they don't have gubernatorial term limits, so he can just stick around and wait for the 2032 cycle when I think he would probably be in a much better position because, going by historical trends, it's not terribly likely the Republicans win in 2028. I'm just going to be honest. Especially right now in this moment, it kind of feels like there's going to be a lot of trading. And so for structural reasons, it's probably a 70-30 that Democrats win or Republicans win, just going by pure historical standards. Who knows what will happen? So, if you're in his position, like it's quite a risky idea to run for a number of reasons. Like he's pretty much ensconced as the God King of Texas for as long as he wants the position. I don't think he's terribly old. Let's see. Hold on. How old is he? He's 67. So yeah, he can wait. He has time, right? So I could totally see him just like, maybe I'll give 2032 a shot, right? And he can just keep sticking around doing his thing. He's got a perfect position to always be in the headlines with, the border, blah, 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 stuff like that, right? Kemp, Kemp, his problem is that he's just seen as too much of a moderate, right? Like he's not actually particularly moderate. He's got a couple policies like he's, kind of pro EVs, like stuff like that or whatever, but he is just kind of seen as not kind of like based or cool enough, right? I know I said like Rubio, for example, earlier, but like the thing is there, like that's contingent on a Trump endorsement. I think in a scenario where Trump doesn't endorse, it's kind of going to be a bit of a race to the bottom in terms of who can be the most like kind of bombastic or sort of not even necessarily Trump-esque, because no one can do it like him. Just flat out, like no one has been able to replicate that blend of kind of charisma, pushing the gauntlet, stuff like that or whatever for the conservative movement. But I don't really see someone like Kemp really lighting a fire in the Republican heartland or whatever, and really getting these people going. Same with like someone like Youngkin. Youngkin was sort of a lot of people's like, oh, this guy's really maybe presidential material. I mean, oh my God, he was a Republican governor of Virginia. Oh my God, wow, right? But then in the 2024, like the mid, or was it 2022? I forget. He had his, no, it was 2024. He had his midterms, the Virginia midterms, and this like whatever, their state assembly, whatever. And he decided to make the whole race about abortion. He decided to run on like, oh, we're gonna put forward like I've this incredible idea, guys. We're gonna do like a 12-week ban, a 12 or 16-week ban, and I'm just gonna be revolutionary policy for a GOP governor to pursue. And people were like, I'm good, I'm okay, I'm gonna vote for the Democrats. And he did not do terribly well. Like he made this huge deal that he was doing this like, oh, I'm gonna as a Republican, I'm gonna run on abortion. I'm gonna just be a key policy, in the wake of Roe. And it did not work out very well. So I kind of think he's like massively overrated just because of his not even really that impressive win in 2022. I mean, he barely won. Like I think he won by like a point, and it's not like Virginia's like an extremely extremely blue state. Like, yeah, he won by 2 points, about 2 points against Terry McAuliffe. However you pronounce that. Like, I don't know. That doesn't really strike me as that crazy of a win. So I kind of think he's highly overrated. Kristi Noem is an example of someone who might do okay, but like, she's kind of weirdly prone to controversy. The whole dog thing, for example. I would have rated her as a stronger candidate before. You have your meme candidates like Burgum or something. But I think it'll largely come down to like, I could see someone like, Carlson, if he's interested in it, having like an okay chance in a scenario like this. Ted Cruz, honestly, is kind of like hilarious as that is, considering, Lion Ted, like all that stuff. I don't like. I know people like the speculation about someone like Tom Cotton or Josh Hawley because of the whole especially in Hawley's case, like national conservatism, blah blah blah. But if you actually like watch these guys talk, watch their whole thing, like I don't know, there's just something about it. Like it doesn't really feel like they are people who could really like get in there and win like a GOP primary. You know, I don't know. I just don't really, I don't know if I really see it. Why do I say that, for example, not being the case for Cruz? Because Cruz, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he did very, very well in 2016. Now, this was partly because, of course, the field consolidated around him towards the end, but he won Iowa. He won the first contest of that race. Like, you know, and like, that was a pretty impressive feat. Like, he does very well with evangelicals. You know, and I mean, obviously things have maybe changed, blah, 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 but I think he would be a strong candidate, as kind of cringeworthy as he can be in his whole like podcast thing and sort of just being like, but that's the thing. He's a lot more representative of like what the GOP, what the average Republican voter is than, for example, a lot of these online guys like Bannon, like the more based guys, right? Based, quote unquote. Like, you know, I mean, I think that I would not be shocked if Cruz did pretty well in that scenario. Now, I will also say that, yeah, like someone like Haley or whatever, that's kind of a meme. That's kind of a joke, right? I mean, like she almost won New Hampshire in 2024, but that was because like it was an open primary, basically. Like Democrats and independents could vote in it, and they all just kind of voted for her as like a protest thing because there was no real Democratic primary that year. So I don't actually think she has much of a base in the party. Same for someone like Rand Paul. Like these kind of people who want to like would want to transform it. Rand Paul in the case of like more of like a genuine libertarian thing. Like you can see how Thomas Massey is like completely isolated as like the only like legit kind of like libertarian guy in the House. You know, like there's basically no one else willing to take up the positions that he does in the kind of GOP House delegation. And the same thing kind of goes for Haley in terms of being like, not that Haley is actually some super moderate, but like that's kind of the way that she codes or like presents. I don't really think there's much of an appetite for that. Liz Cheney is a total meme. I don't even know why. I don't know who is speculating this. So that's certainly not something I'm ruling out. Well, I'm going to rule it out for her. I do not think that, yeah, I'm supportive of people like Murkowski, who isn't really a Republican. I mean, like at this point, like, come on. Yeah, that's kind of a joke. Tulsi Gabbard, I mean, who knows? Same with RFK Jr. I guess of the kind of Dem turncoat thing. I think both of those people would have a pretty decent chance. Don Bacon, that's a total meme. I don't know why he thinks he could run for president, because this is someone who's actually expressed interest in it. Like that's hilarious that Don Bacon thinks that. Just a moron. But you know, yeah, I mean, so that's my list overall. I mean, why did I make this video? It's because, you know, I like talking about this. I think this is fun. I know the previous videos I made a few months ago were all about Canadian politics, but you know, I gotta say, here I'm largely done with the video. I'm just wrapping up a little bit here. I gotta say, I got really, really goddamn bored of the election, the Canadian election back in when I stopped making those videos in like March. Oh my God, what a snooze fest. Now Canadian politics is a little more interesting again. You know, you get some stuff moving around. Things are kind of a little more interesting. Like, it was very clear that Carney was going to win from the outset there. There was actually not much suspense, so I kind of just got bored of the whole thing. But I did like the experiment. I like trying it, and I find that, you know, making videos like this, these kind of horse race things, it's a bit, there are parts of it that are a little grating at times. But I think there is something interesting about it. There is value in it. And I think that people do find it interesting. So, you know, let me know if you liked this whole thing. I don't know if anyone will watch this, who knows, whatever. But I'm going to put it out there anyway. I'm going to try. I will also, regardless of how it does, I will also do a video like this for the Democrats, probably relatively soon, just because, you know, why not? And you know, I find it interesting. I like talking about it. That's also a very interesting thing. I'll probably try to do more videos about general, like, global stuff. I imagine a fair bit about American politics, because that is actually really my number one interest. I would kind of rate it American politics, Canadian politics, and then UK politics. But yeah, I mean, if you're interested in any of that, want to stick around, then yeah, I mean, you can subscribe, like the video, etc. Blah 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 blah. And I will endeavor to make more content. When? I don't know, but I'll try to soonish, and I want to give this another shot. So, you know, that was Bactry, and if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, etc. Blah blah blah. Have a good one. Bye.